I was sitting in the small cafe across the street, staring out of the window at the tall, glass-fronted bank building that had dominated this corner of town for decades. It was a bright, sunny morning, but my mood didn't match the weather. I was nervous. Really nervous. Today was supposed to be the start of something big for me. I was on my way to an interview at the bank. Not just any job, either. An analyst position, something I'd worked so hard for. I had graduated top of my class, gotten my MBA, and spent countless nights reading books about finance and economics. This wasn't just a job. It was the job. A chance to prove that all those years of sacrifice and hard work were worth it. My mom had always told me, when you get an opportunity, you grab it with both hands. Today was supposed to be that day. I adjusted my tie nervously, looking at my reflection in the cafe window. I'd worn my best suit, the one I bought after saving up for months. I made sure my shoes were polished to a mirror shine. I didn't want to give anyone a reason to think I wasn't serious about this. "Excuse me," the waitress said, interrupting my thoughts as she placed a steaming cup of coffee on my table. I hadn't even realized I'd ordered it. "Good luck with whatever you're doing today." I smiled at her. "Thanks, I'm gonna need it." The lobby of the bank was sleek and modern, with marble floors that echoed every step I took. A receptionist greeted me with a polite smile and directed me to the elevator. My heart pounded in my chest as I rode up to the 15th floor. This was it. I had studied every possible question they could throw at me. I had rehearsed my answers 100 times in front of the mirror. I was ready. When I stepped into the conference room, 3 men in suits were already waiting. Their eyes briefly flicked over me, and one of them, a middle-aged man with thinning gray hair, motioned for me to sit down. His name tag read, Mr. Stevens. He introduced himself as the branch manager. The first few minutes were formal. They asked about my education, my previous work experience, and why I wanted to work there. I thought it was going well until the questions started to change. "So tell me," Mr. Stevens said, leaning back in his chair, "do you have any experience handling high-net-worth clients?" I explained that while I hadn't directly worked with high-net-worth clients yet, my internships had given me valuable insight into the world of finance. I had worked hard to prepare myself for a role like this, but as I spoke, I could feel the room growing colder. Another interviewer, a younger man with slicked-back hair, cleared his throat. "You seem very eager," he said, his tone dismissive. "But we're looking for someone who fits the culture here. Someone who can naturally connect with our clientele." I froze for a moment, unsure of what he meant. "I believe I can connect with anyone," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I've worked with diverse groups of people my entire life." Mr. Stevens exchanged a glance with the other 2 men. "We appreciate your enthusiasm," he said, but his words felt hollow. "We'll be in touch." The entire interview lasted maybe 20 minutes, but it felt like an eternity. I left the building with a sinking feeling in my chest. Deep down, I knew what had just happened. They hadn't rejected me for lack of qualifications or enthusiasm. They had rejected me because they didn't think someone like me, a black man, belonged in their world. I walked aimlessly for a while, trying to process it all. Anger bubbled up inside me, but so did something else: determination. I had faced discrimination before. My parents had warned me about it, prepared me for it. They always told me you have to work twice as hard, be twice as good, just to get half as far. It wasn't fair, but it was reality. That night, as I sat at my small kitchen table, I thought about everything my family had sacrificed for me to get to this point. My mom worked as a nurse, pulling double shifts so I could go to college. My dad, who drove trucks for a living, had always told me, "Son, you're going to do things I could only dream of." I couldn't let them down. The next morning, I called a mentor of mine, Mr. Carter. He was an older gentleman who had built a successful real estate business from scratch. I told him about the interview, about how I felt dismissed, and about how I wanted to turn this rejection into an opportunity. "Good," he said after listening to my story. "Take that anger and do something with it. They don't see your value, show them." Mr. Carter and I had talked before about investments. He knew I had been saving for years, building up capital for my first big venture. With his guidance, I decided to do something bold. I wasn't just going to prove those men wrong, I was going to make a statement. The following days were a whirlwind. I dove headfirst into research, learning everything I could about the bank's building. It turned out the property wasn't owned by the bank itself, it was leased from a real estate investment firm. That firm had been struggling financially, and the building was one of their underperforming assets. I contacted Mr. Carter again, and together, we put together an offer. It wasn't easy. Buying a commercial building requires more than just money. But I had something those bankers didn't expect: resilience. A week later, the deal was finalized. I signed the papers in Mr. Carter's office, my hands trembling with a mix of excitement and disbelief. I had done it. I was now the owner of the building that housed the very bank that had turned me away. The day I walked back into that bank, everything felt different. I was no longer a nervous job applicant. I was the landlord. Mr. Stevens didn't recognize me at first. He was standing in the lobby, talking to a colleague when I approached him. "Mr. Stevens," I said, extending my hand. "I'm the new owner of this building. Thought I'd come by to introduce myself." His face turned pale. For a moment, he looked like he didn't know what to say. Welcome," he stammered, shaking my hand reluctantly. I smiled politely. "I hope you and your team are happy here. Let me know if there's anything you need." As I walked out of the bank that day, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. It wasn't just about proving a point. It was about reclaiming my dignity, about showing them and myself that I was more than what they saw in that interview room. In the weeks that followed, I made it a point to visit the building regularly, not out of spite, but to remind myself of what I was capable of. Every time I walked through those doors, I thought about my parents, my mentors, and all the people who had believed in me even when others didn't. The story spread quickly in our community. People started calling me the guy who bought the bank. Some saw it as a tale of sweet revenge, but for me, it was about something deeper. It was about standing tall in the face of adversity, about refusing to let someone else define my worth. Life has a funny way of turning things around. That rejection, which had felt so crushing in the moment, turned out to be the push I needed to chase something even bigger. It taught me that success isn't just about climbing someone else's ladder, it's about building your own. Even now, years later, I still think about that day in the interview room. I think about how small they made me feel, and how far I've come since then. But most of all, I think about what my dad used to say: "Son, when one door closes, build another one, and make sure it's big enough for everyone to walk through." And that's exactly what I did.